Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 13, Text 24, Translation and Commentary by Servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Manasa Vachasa Drishtya Grihyate Nyairapindriyaha Ahameva Namato Nyad Iti Buddhyadvam Anjasa. Translation: within this world, whatever is perceived by the mind, speech, eyes or other senses is me alone and nothing besides me. All of you, please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. Purport: Lord Krishna has already explained that if the sages consider all living entities to be the same, or if they consider the living entity to be the same as his body, then his question, "Who are you?" is inappropriate. Now the Lord refutes the conception that he is a supreme God, far beyond and different from everything within this world. Modern agnostic philosophers preach that God created the world and then retired or went away. According to them, God has no tangible connection with this world, nor does he interfere in human affairs. Ultimately, they claim God is so great that he cannot be known, therefore no one should waste time trying to understand God. To refute such foolish ideas, the Lord here explains that since everything is the expansion of his potency, he is not different from anything. Nothing can exist separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus everything shares in the Lord's nature, although some manifestations are superior and others inferior. The Lord is testing the intelligence of the sages by pointing out various contradictions in their questions. Even if the Lord is supreme, he is not different from his creation. Therefore, what is the meaning of the question, "Who are you?" We can clearly see that the Lord is paving the way for a deep discussion of spiritual knowledge. The question of how the senses can be withdrawn from the sense objects, or the sense objects separated from the senses. It's actually a pretty intelligent question. It was asked by the most intelligent people in the universe from their most intelligent Father. Of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is far more intelligent than anyone, and who is the intelligence of everyone. Buddhi buddhimatam asmi. They call their question foolish. But from another perspective, it's very intelligent. Sitting on this side of the Viraja River, which we happen to be, that means in the material world, it's the most intelligent question that one could ask, because if one perceives, withdraws oneself somewhat from the hurly-burly of ongoing life in the material world, just steps back a bit and sees, you can see that everything here is miserable, and that, as Lord Krishna states, he states it in Bhagavad Gita, but it can be perceived, just as Lord Buddha perceived it, by intelligent analysis of the situation of this material world. Yehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. That the interaction of the senses with the sense objects is simply a cause of suffering from the beginning, middle and end, and therefore an intelligent person does not take part in it. So then the intelligent question of the Kumaras is that, well, how do you do that? How do you not take part in it? Because The senses are always interacting with the sense objects. As Krishna himself states in Bhagavad Gita, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtadya karma krit. We always have to do something. It's not possible not to do anything, even for a moment. Even if one sits quietly and meditates, then you're also sitting and meditating. You're also doing something. If we propose to stop all activities, then stop breathing, and then no more activities in this body. So the senses are always interacting with the sense objects, and that is the cause of misery, and therefore one has to separate the senses from the sense objects. But one cannot do that because they're intricately connected. So it's it is actually the most intelligent question that anyone can ask. But it's stupid, says Krishna in the form of Hamsa Avatar. Well, that's the thing, because we're on this side of the Viraja river, that everything we do is stupid, from beginning to end. And even the ultimate limit of intelligence is stupid. The stupidity is non-perception of Krishna. And therefore, yehi sangsparshaja bhoga dukkha yone evati. The interaction of the senses with the sense objects, bhoga, for sense enjoyment, that is the cause of suffering. It's not the interaction of the senses with the sense objects that intrinsically causes suffering, but the attitude that I will enjoy. So, everything in this world is intrinsically stupid, and therefore the most intelligent persons, going to the extreme level, the utmost level of their intelligence, and asking the most, and inquiring at the most intelligent level, cannot but be stupid. And as Lord Hamsa Avatar points out, well, what about me? You forgot about me. You're just seeing everything in this world, but what about me? You didn't see me, you damn fools. Everything is non-different from me, and you don't see me. Unless you see me, you're not really seeing anything at all. You're missing the whole point. Whatever you're seeing, manasa, by the mind. Ultimately, everything is perceived by the mind. The sense, or the mind is the center of the senses. So ultimately, everything is perceived by the mind, which not only perceives. The mind is not simply a machine, just like a light sensor can sense the different kinds of light, as we were discussing, and say, and give out a message, and I see red light, I see green light, and you could even program it maybe to say, I see a black cat. If the former, with modern computer technology, you could have it programmed to say, I see. If the form of a cat comes in front of it, could be programmed to say, I see a black cat.
He could say, I love a black cat.
He could say, I love a black cat. Could be programmed to say that. Yeah, could be programmed to say that. But the mind is not simply perceiving, but is perceiving with the judgment of whether the mind, the senses see and the mind judges. Is this suitable for my sense gratification or not? And therefore, on the basis of that, anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. Is this object suitable for my sense gratification? If so, accept it. If not, reject it. This is called sankalpa vikalpa, which is accepting and rejecting. This is the business of the mind. So we see, just like a piece of meat. You see, I see, and someone else sees. You and I see, and we see that, and we think horrible. And someone else sees the same thing and think very nice. It's the same object, but the attitude toward it is different. So the mind is the center of the senses, but it's not just processing sensual input, but it's also also deciding how to respond to it. The lion cub, when he sees his mother, thinks very nice. And when the gazelle or zebra sees the lion, it's very dangerous. So one feels pleasure and the other feels fear, the same object. So actually fear is the underlying current of material existence, because nothing in this world is actually favorable for our pleasure or well-being. So fear is the underlying current. So by the mind, by speech, by sight, everything is perceived and thus accepted to all the senses. But by not perceiving Krishna, we perceive everything to be objects of our sense enjoyment. And thus, we are entangled in material life. The impersonalists, they want to get free from this entanglement. But because they're not inclined toward Krishna, then they cannot conceive of, and actually the impersonal conception of spirituality, it is simply an extension of the bodily concept of life, in which one thinks everything here is for my enjoyment. And then when one considers that actually it doesn't give me any enjoyment, then instead of thinking that, well, maybe I should act for Krishna's enjoyment, or I'm not meant for enjoyment, then they simply want to negate that. They can only imagine bodily enjoyment, and they can't imagine, or personal enjoyment. They can't imagine anything else. But then when they see that efforts for personal enjoyment have failed, then just switch off everything. There's nothing left. Either nothingness, the void, the shunya, of shunyavadis, like Buddhists, or a decorated nothingness. Decorated with more nothingness. In other words, the impersonal realization of merging. Brahman is all that be, but it has no quality. So it comes to nothing also. Brahman, according to the impersonalists, is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss, Satchidanand, but it has no qualities. But those are qualities in itself. So the qualities of formlessness and impersonality. But somehow or other it's eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, even though there's no object or person, no perceiver. According to them, the perceiver, the perceived, and the act of perception all become one. That's as absurd as the sound of one hand clapping of the Zen Buddhas. It just doesn't. It's inconceivable. Of course, our philosophy is also inconceivable. But when we say inconceivable, when we say achintya, that's not the same as the nirvachaniya of the impersonalists, who they say it's totally inconceivable. It cannot be conceived of at all, like the sound of one hand clapping. But the inconceivability of that the Vaishnavas profess is that the extent of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are not within our power to measure, but that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is certainly conceivable. And that was the fault of the four Kumaras. And Brahma, he was also influenced by the bodily concept of life and impersonal understanding, and therefore he didn't get the point that, well, it's not the whole approach that how can we separate the senses from the sense objects. The whole approach is based on a misunderstanding that the senses are meant to enjoy the sense objects. But when we understand that there's no, why try to separate the senses from the sense objects? Rather, the senses should be engaged in the service of the master of the senses, and that is Bhakti. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanang Bhakti Ruchyate. There are several definitions of Bhakti. This is one of them. Sarvopadi vinirmam, being totally free from all mundane designations and totally pure, totally free from that, and engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is Bhakti, and that is our pure position. So, this impersonalism is not really spiritual. It's not really transcendental. It's just it's a negation of the material. But negation of the material is not in itself spiritual. It's something like -1, 0, and +1. The material situation is a minus situation. The negation of that brings us to the 0 position. But the plus position is in the service of Krishna. So that's why the impersonal realization, or those who are impersonally realized and perfect, they are called by Lord Brahma Vimuktamani. They think that they are fully liberated, but they're something like the mouse who's been caught by the cat, and the cat lets the mouse run away, so the mouse thinks he's free, and then again the cat catches. Has anyone seen that? Cat playing with a mouse like that? They just it's a vicious pleasure that the mouse thinks, oh, now I'm free, and it looks like it's gone far away enough, and the cat, and then again catches and throws up in the air a little bit, and then lets it fall down, and if it struggles off, so in this way, they think that they're free, but they're not free. For the fault, they still have the fault, even though they may be pure in some ways. That they're not directly attracted to gross sense gratification. But even though they have, by very difficult practice, negated or apparently negated the attraction of the senses for the sense objects, they've done what the Kumaras have proposed here. They've almost done it. I mean, it's not that the senses are not interacting with the senses, but they've been able to mechanically control their senses. It's a very difficult thing to do. They've mechanically controlled their senses to be samaloshta kanchana, that they see gold, stones, lump of grass. They see everything as the same. They're not attracted to any sensual pleasure. So they've been able to do that, and then in the process themselves becoming as hard as a stone, because there's no love. No love, no hate, or there's some apparent love, but that an undefined cosmic love for everything, which it's not really helpful for anything. And realizing that, they sometimes open hospitals or schools, because love requires an object. So they're trying to cultivate higher consciousness. So their love, because they refuse to focus that on Krishna, then it becomes focused on the mundane. And as Srila Prabhupada pointed out, the other side of love is hate. In one of the early Bhakti Godheads, written during or just after the Second World War, Srila Prabhupada wrote about the frenzy of hate which had caused the Second World War. And Srila Prabhupada replied that the frenzy of hate, so we want to come to the platform of love, but then we just come into the platform of the frenzy of love. That the madness of love in this material world, if love is not directed to the right object of love, then it cannot actually be love at all. Love requires an object, and there is the universe is set up in such a way that it requires a specific object, who can love means that there's no personal motive, and love to be perfect should be full, complete, unending, without any possibility of any obstruction. That's only possible in relationship to Krishna. So love in relationship to other living beings of this material world who desire sense gratification separate from Krishna, that is actually that love is only nourishing their envy of Krishna. So it's not love at all. And if one is not come to the position of pure love of Krishna, then our so-called love is also another way of nourishing our envy or forgetfulness of Krishna. And therefore we find that in the name of some of the people who talk about love and become famous for talking about love and are revered for being great lovers are actually demons, inasmuch as they eat veal and other horrible things, such as certain llamas, and we're not talking about four-legged animals in the Andes here, or certain mothers who live in Calcutta, who are eating meat every day and talking about love and feeding meat to their inmates and all this kind of thing. So they're love because they're actually envious of Krishna. They're not inclined toward Krishna. They may even talk of God, but at the same time they don't want to know about Him. Here in the purport, God is the claim of the agnostics. God is the word agnostic generally means one who claims to neither believe in God nor disbelieve, but he says, well, it's beyond our power to understand. So it works out as atheism. Because without acceptance of the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's non-acceptance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is atheism, and a kind of conditional possible acceptance does not amount to acceptance of Him. So here the word agnostic here in the purport is being used as for those who claim to believe in God. Well, it's actually, there are two or three types of semi-theists or pseudo-theists mentioned here. Claim to believe in God, but according to the sharp analysis of Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam, scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead, do not qualify as actual theists. So one type is that they say that God created the world and then He got bored with it and then He just left it alone and had nothing else to do with it. Or he put a twist on that in the modern ages, the Christians who say that everything was created by God in 6 days, then who have now surrendered to evolutionary and Big Bang theory, say that He put everything in place and then He just let it go on, and He did it such a good job that it's just evolution is just unfolding by His brilliant design in the beginning. Although of course atheistic scientists say, well, you don't need God for that, you know. And then we have the God is dead school of the famous Nietzsche, yeah. God is dead. Maybe you know that at least I was told it.
Dead God still around.
That someone had written a graffiti, God is dead, sign Nietzsche. And someone else had put a graffiti, Nietzsche is dead, sign God. Like that. So, although apparently Nietzsche also said in a sardonic way that I would believe in God if He danced. So he just got the wrong concept of God. If we gave Him Krishna, He might have danced with Him. He might have danced with Krishna. But it's perceptive, actually, that the idea of a nasty old man sitting on a cloud. He's old because he created the world. He must be really old by now. He's got a long white beard. He's so busy managing the universe, didn't have time to shave. And or maybe they didn't get shaving foam up there yet. So sitting on a cloud, looking down and angrily punishing. I will smite him ad infinitum. That was a song I was taught in school. One of the few things I remember from school. So, any intelligent person would think this is rubbish. But then, if you're a little bit more intelligent, think, well, it's rubbish, but there should be some kind of God. Anyway, not that God. Just like this East Village Other, I think it was, this magazine in 1966 reported on Prabhupada that he's God's ambassador. He's come to God. They wrote it in what would you call that language? Not exactly satirical, but ironic language. Yeah, that Bhaktivedanta Swami is sent by God to give the message of him because the churches already buried God, and he was thought to be fully dead. But Bhaktivedanta Swami has come to say that he's alive and well, but not in the churches. I can't remember exactly. It's a quotable quote. It's worth learning. So there's God is dead, and there's also the idea. This is in Islam. The whole idea is that God is so sacred that we cannot know anything about him, and even to postulate that we can know anything about him is a great offense for which you could get stoned to death or worse. Actually, the stoning to death, it's not a new thing. And as you know, you did that. The Ahmadiyas or Aga Khanis. Yeah. So, where was that? In Afghanistan. Yeah. Some Aga. Yeah.
80, 90 years ago.
Yeah. It was quite common in Afghanistan, at least until recently, for kafirs who they're heretical Muslims. So, the idea that God is so great that we cannot know, he's just so totally different from anything and everything that to think, and we are so small that we cannot know anything about. The only thing we know is that if we are a good Muslim, that we will go to heaven, and there he will provide us unlimited virgins forever. And so it's not a very developed concept. It's practically atheism, that we cannot know anything whatsoever about him. He's so different from his creation. He's so totally different that we cannot know anything whatsoever. And even to think that we can know is an offense. So this is another twist of impersonalism, which I was in Bangladesh for many years, so we used to ask the Muslims, so you do your namaz 5 times a day, so when you're praying to Allah, and then, well, if Allah is not a person, then what is the meaning of praying? And that he spoke to Muhammad means must be a person. There's something tangible about him that he spoke. So anyway, these ideas, actually even this semi-theism or partial theism or pseudo-theism, in which they don't know God, or they don't know God, therefore they have accepted that Jesus is God, which he never said himself. And in this way they also become Mayavadis, because they identify a jiva with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they say he was killed. God was killed. They become full of so many discrepancies in their understanding, because they haven't actually come to the platform of theism, of Sarvopadi vinir muktam tatparat vena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhakti rupchate, that we are meant for the service of God. We are not meant for enjoyment of this world. That's the same fault that in the question of the Kumaras, which therefore it was rejected as being unintelligent, because inherent in that question is the idea that the constitutional position of the jiva is to enjoy this world, and that this isn't very good, so just negate it or get separated from this world, just ignoring the fact that this world and everything in it, including ourselves, are the property and meant for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So all these theologies that there is a God very remote, we don't really know much about him, but anyway, we'd better believe in him, otherwise he'll throw us into hell. And if we do believe in him, he'll reward us with unlimited virgins or whatever. So this is actually anthropomorphism. It's the idea that it doesn't really give much concept of God, except that he's meant for facilitating our sense gratification. That's all. But the fact that he has maybe not anthropomorphism, but we could say, what's that word? Anthropocentrism. That we, human beings, are meant for enjoyment, and therefore God gave us the world to enjoy it. He gave us the animals to slaughter them so that we could enjoy them. So this ignores the fact that he has his own existence and that he is much greater than us, suggests that we are meant for serving him, not that he is meant for serving us. If we're good, he'll hand us he'll give us some facility for unlimited enjoyment, that we are meant for serving him. So all these religions, they are full of contradictions, and only in their philosophy, because they get it wrong from the very beginning. So actually only this Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam, this scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead as given in Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the only perfect theology which presents Krishna, the supreme enjoyer. We are meant for serving him, and by doing so we become completely fulfilled. And by not doing so, even if we try to detach ourselves from the material world but fail to serve him, we're not really in a much better position than those who are involved in gross sense gratification. We're just withdrawn for a short time, but we still have the same basic disease of envy of Krishna. So this Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam, this scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead, it is essential that, especially those of us who have come to this Krishna consciousness movement, understand it in all respects. There's a term which comes up often in the description of the creation, otam protam. That means this way and that way. It means that the Supreme Lord, it means the weep and the wove. Sorry, the wove and the weep. It means like this. You see, it's the weaving. Whoop, lost my hand there. Got entangled. So both ways. The entire constitution of this cloth is horizontal and vertical. So these terms are used for the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's in everything, he makes up everything, and without him and the design he's given, nothing works. Of course, this is very simple, and the way the universe, the horizontal and vertical pattern which keeps this all together, it's very simple, and within the cosmos it's much more complex, the different interactions, but they have to be in a certain way for various objects to exist as they are. For atoms to exist, there has to be so many conditions. For molecules, and then for cells, and then for objects which are formed from them, and the interaction of different objects, of different living beings. So it's all Mayadhyakshena Prakriti, Suyate Sacharacharam. Hetuna Anena Kaunteya Jagad Viparivartate. It's all going on because of Krishna. That ultimate, what's that? The unified field. What's that? Unified field theory. Or the idea of a theory of everything which can explain everything. Get out your you don't use logarithm tables anymore. Get out your thinking apparatus and mathematics. Let's try and work it out. We won't find Krishna in mathematics. We'll find Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna cannot be found by mathematics, cannot be found by any amount of logical inquiry, except that which from the beginning is Krishnonmukh, which is inclined toward him. Otherwise, by any material endeavor, we cannot find Krishna. So, one has to associate with devotees. Then one becomes the greatest philosopher and transcendentalist. And without that, however advanced a scientist or however advanced a transcendentalist one is, one cannot but remain stupid. For all the endeavors of the scientists, they're stupid. Stephen Hawking is a fool. Einstein was also a fool. In the ultimate sense, they were foolish. Materially, they were, from our perspective or compared to us, they were very intelligent. But they asked the wrong questions, like the Kumaras asked the wrong question. They didn't ask the right question. And therefore, all their endeavors, although they intelligently investigated that which was not worth investigating, at least not in that way. Just that you'll find someone, they might spend their whole life, do a PhD, and then go into research studying the mating habits of a rare species of caterpillar. Oh, wait a minute, caterpillars don't have mating, do they? Of butterflies. Okay. And so it's a stupid thing to waste your whole life on. And for that matter, studying anything in this material world is stupid unless we come to the proper inquiry. Atato Brahma Jignasa. What is the nature of reality? The Kumaras thought they'd done that. But one has to do it one has to take that inquiry to its ultimate limit and find out what is the Param Satya, which is a synonym of Brahma. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devam Ajam Vibhum. Krishna is the supreme truth, the supreme abode of everything. So, if we conceive of Brahma, the supreme, as impersonal, then we end up simply on the same platform, like on the Ferris wheel, going round and round. We run very hard, but we end up in the same position. Whereas, if we simply understand this point, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, even from the beginning, if we accept this point, then we immediately step over, by that one acceptance, we step over all levels of mundane inquiry and speculation, even up to the level of Einstein and even up to the level of the four Kumaras, of course, who later became great devotees. And even the Lord Brahma, if he's not Bahimokha Brahma, what is that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Janme Nahiyash. Janme Nahiyash. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, I don't want to become even a Brahma if I'm inimical to you. So, you're all greater scientists than Einstein. Every single one of you. Inasmuch as you accept that Krishna is the origin of everything. Krishna is the overseer and maintainer of everything. And ultimately, Krishna is the destroyer of everything in this world. That is science. Etaj jnanam iti protam. Ajnanam yadaton yata. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. This is knowledge. That, the actual symptoms of knowledge are seen in purification of one's existence. And particularly, avyabhicharini bhakti. That is the essence of knowledge, accept Krishna as supreme, and our position as of undiverted devotion to Him. That is knowledge, and everything else is ignorance. Hare Krishna. Any question or comment about this, please? Yes.
I have several questions, but I'll go for one and then let others have a chance. I was just wondering, when you're traveling in India, especially you talk a very nice term, decorated nothingness. I like that very much, decorated nothing. But it has qualities because they say Satchidananda. So how do they describe that that's experience? Have you ever had a person explain? Because if there's no seer, seen, and after seeing, how does
it's the same thing as here with neo-impersonalists or wannabe impersonalists in America. It comes down to the same thing, that when you catch them on the throat philosophically, then they say words, it's beyond words. Nirvachaniya, that's their term. Then ultimately it cannot be explained by words. They come to the same point. Satchidananda itself is qualities, but they say the ultimate is without qualities. It's ending of Krishna. And it's not philosophically tenable, not philosophically sound. Yeah.
Okay, one other question. How do Muslims respond when you said, you're offering prayers, so God is hearing them?
God is hearing them.
Spoke, so how's that working?
How does that work? The Muslims, they're not very. The Muslims I've discussed with, of course, they're mostly Bangladeshi Muslims. They're not a very good group to discuss any philosophy with. It's in their culture. Actually, it was in all religious cultures of the world to some extent or other previously, that just don't think. Actually, it was in all cultures. Don't think that only the imams and they will do all the thinking for you. That was in Christianity also.
Sure.
Don't read the Bible. For printing the Bible, people were burned to death for making it available, because it should be explained only through the church. And that's also their in Vedic culture, that the Shudras, they have no access to the Vedas. That should be explained by the Brahmanas, and I guess to some extent by the kings also. Because it's highly esoteric knowledge. They muddle it up, yeah. I was once on a long train journey from Calcutta to Delhi, and I was sitting next to me were some Bangladeshi Muslims who were going to Ajmer, which is it's the most sacred place in the whole Indian subcontinent for Muslims. Not all Muslims, but they have the Dargah there, which is like the Samadhi of a saint. So they were going there. So I had a long discussion, and logically, we had lots of time, so it's going on over hour, maybe about 2 hours or 3 hours. How we have to, step by step, they bring up all these arguments, and then you come to the point where they couldn't avoid that the Supreme is a person. And then you know what they said? They said, well, we don't believe it. And what were you discussing for two and a half hours for? We don't believe it. They were nice enough people, Asambhasya. This word comes up in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. In regard to the Buddhists, they're not fit to discuss with. And actually everyone in the world is unless the condition for being sambhasya or worthy of discussion with is that the first condition should be that they accept Vedavani, the knowledge of the Vedas, as axiomatic. If they don't, within Vedic culture, that is the precondition for discussing anything, and that also includes accepting the tools of Mimamsa and Nyaya, for the hermeneutic tools for discussing Shastra. So, but anyway, everyone in the world including the Hindus. Mostly they don't accept even not as a principle. They don't even know that as a principle. Prabhupada writes in the Isha, well, it's actually in the Conway Hall lecture. Dravida Prabhu was mentioning what are the Vedas, that form the introduction to Sri Isha Upanishad, and Srila Prabhupada there states that in India, if someone says to you, why do I have to follow you? Is it a Vedic injunction? Then that's given as an example of how everyone accepts the Vedas. And another example that according to the Vedas, the stool of an animal or even of a human is impure, but that of a cow is pure, or the bone of an animal or a human is impure, but that of a conch is pure. So one just has to accept this. One simply has to accept it axiomatically. But in modern India, there's no such thing. It's much confused, and I put that down to this Gadadha Chattopadhyay, aka Paramohangsa Ramakrishna, with his Jotto Mot Toto Pot, which really made a mess of everything. So we get these so-called gurus. They'll quote a little of the Upanishads here and there, or Veda or something like that, but basically it's just nonsense. And therefore we have your Sri Sris and your Asharams and your Ammas and all kinds of nonsense people, Babas and Appas and Ammas and we could put the machine gun to good use in Krishna's service, given the opportunity. Prabhupada said that about Vivekananda. It's not the kind of thing we want to propagate very widely. But
you're being recorded.
It was recorded. Well, it's already recorded. It's there in the conference.
Krishna bang bang. We all know.
It's Prabhupada said, if I would have been in power, I would have hanged him. So Prabhupada expressed his Advaishta Sarva Bhutanam, his non-envy toward all living beings by desiring to hang Vivekananda. Yeah, like Vidur, when Duryodhana was born, he said to Dhritarashtra, kill him now. Better. Infanticide. Better now. Heavy stuff. Huh? It's not all love, peace, and
understanding.
Love, peace, and what's that other way? Yeah, understanding, sensitivity, empathy, and all this kind of thing. Yeah? Yes, please. All right.
So I want to bring up another philosophy as well.
Well, let's stick to the topic of the class for now. If there's anything else, we could.
Blake is timidly raising his hand.
That was Srila Prabhupada's standard. The questions, they should follow the subject. It's general standard. Yeah. Otherwise, you can go off on all kinds. There are many things, but one particular topic has been discussed today, so we'll try to elucidate that some more. Yeah.
Could I add a comment on the topic?
Yes, please.
Theism is described as Harinam Bhav. In other words, there's God and there's transformation of God's energies. And atheism is messing up this relationship of God with his energies. So materialists mess up the relationship by exploiting God's energies. Mayavadis by not making a difference.
By denying them, yeah.
By just making a mess of it both, just merging it all together. And then pantheists, they take the divinity away from God and give it to the energy. Like commonly you see that among hippies, worshipping trees, and God forbid you say something against trees and all that. And in that sense, Einstein fits completely into the category of an atheist. If anyone knows anything about his life, like he had two wives, and first one was, whatever, but when he was with his second wife, he eventually moved to the States because Hitler wanted to kill him. And he would commonly, because he was such a popular personality, many people would come to see him, and it was not uncommon that he'd be sitting in a room naked, just covered with what you call the things that you wear bathrobe, and then he would purposefully, show his leg or maybe some of his intimate parts, to female that walked in. Yeah, he was very interested. He was promiscuous. That's Einstein. So that was his understanding of God. That's why Lord Chaitanya in five.
No, he wasn't a theist, that's for sure.
It's an extremely important section of the book that devotees tend to follow.
What's that?
Over Lord Chaitanya in five teachers.
Yeah, that was the first part of Chaitanya Charitamrita that Srila Prabhupada translated and published.
Yeah, it's very important.
That was the first. When Prabhupada, he translated first of all this chapter 7 of the Adi Leela and published that as a separate booklet, Lord Chaitanya in 5 features. And then it's only later that the rest that Prabhupada went back to the chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. But Prabhupada printed this and he said it should be given to every important Mayavadi in India.
Yeah, transformation of energy.
Yeah, and Prabhupada he regularly discussed impersonalism. It's extremely important for us to understand. And because it's very easier for us to get merged back into impersonalism, like Lord Brahma himself we see here.
I just received an email this morning. Viraj Gopal wrote an article about these Mudas chanting Hare Krishna and presenting their lifestyle and their chanting together as one package as a spiritual thing. And he criticized it. It was just an honest analysis of hypocrisy and even mind-numbingly lack of intelligence involved in such a creation. And then you have a devotee, my God, devotee brought to Krishna consciousness, 12 years ago, making a comment, oh, but he brought me to Krishna consciousness.
Who brought who?
That her initial attraction towards spiritual life was ignited by this Krishna Das. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He called himself Krishna Das. He goes around singing that.
And eat steak and eggs.
And offends Krishna. And
yeah, so if people think that such people brought me to Krishna consciousness, and if they retain any attraction to them or affection for them, then they never actually came to Krishna consciousness. Because if you actually come to Krishna consciousness, you cannot retain affection or attraction to them. There was one person wanted to be initiated by me in South India. He was following all the principles and studying Prabhupada's books, but he would say that, well, I came to Krishna consciousness because of my initial interest in Ram Krishna. And I wasn't initiated, and eventually got initiated by someone else within ISKCON. But then he went back to his old, he's mixed Prabhupada's books with the Ram Krishna stuff and this. He never got it out of his system. Unless it's purged out of the system, then you don't actually enter into Krishna consciousness. If one has any affection for the Mayavadis, then he cannot actually be a devotee. Now, certain of them, we may respect them as moral persons, saintly persons in some way. Yeah, some of them who are...
Give me an example of who you're thinking who we respect.
Well, many Mayavadis, they actually rise early in the morning, they study Shastra, they follow principles, they protect cows, like this. So we may respect them for certain principles. Just like Lord Chaitanya, that said that because Prakashananda Saraswati and his crew, they were on one side cultivating offense, Mayavadi, Krishna Aparadhi, but on the other side they were cultivating some punya also. So when that offense was removed, that punya was able to flourish. So, yeah, some people we may respect them on some level as being. If Srila Prabhupada writes in that book, which is called Renunciation Through Wisdom, that was translated from Bengali, he talks about the sadhus of India, that even though many of them smoke and maybe even ganja, but still they're not interested in the gross pleasure of this world. They don't go to cinemas and They go from holy place to holy place. I was once in Kurukshetra in January. It's very cold. And there were sadhus there. They're visiting sadhus. There was no special function or anything, but some of them. And you saw that they were sleeping outside at night next to the, what's that called, Brahma Sarovar, and the lake, and it was just under a covered walkway, so on one side it was open, and they were just covered with blankets. I was inside the room. It was so cold. So they were sleeping like that, and they'd be up early and chanting their mantras and this and that. So they're not gross materialists, at least some of them. But others who are directly cheating others by posing as big gurus, like the names I indirectly mentioned just now, and they're abominable persons, really. But even they, in some ways, are better than the Exians, who at least if people go to them, then they have some inclination. I'll tell you something else. It's getting a bit late here, but I guess we have time. I'm having breakfast this morning. And anyway, life is meant for this. Once, when we were newly in Bangladesh, we were just starting our preaching there. So one Hindu social worker came to discuss with us. And he said, well, it's very good that by your preaching, he said, wherever the Western devotees go and chant Hare Krishna, the tendency for Hindus to convert to Christians stops. So he said, that's very good. And then we teased him, myself and Rasik Prabhu, and said, well, what's the harm if they become Christians? If they're Christians, they believe in God, they go to church regularly. If they're Hindus, mostly they don't have any fixed practice. The Hindus and the Christians, they're both eating flesh. So maybe it's good they become Christians, we said. So he offered various arguments, and then he came up with one that we accepted. He said, well, if they're Hindus, at least they'll be inclined to say the name Gauranga, which if they're Christians, they'll be against that. So we accepted that. They become offensive otherwise. So, anything else?
Yeah. Mike is dying to ask you a question. Right over here. It's a comment, actually. Just about the topic that we're speaking on.
By the way, in public we might not say so many things about Muslims and Christians and so many things. Among ourselves we may discuss like this. But in public lectures or meeting with people we may not say so many things. Yeah.
One interesting thing about that there seems to be some innate need in the human spirit to associate with a form when trying to understand the Supreme. So, like in Zen Buddhist monasteries that I've been to, they, even though their philosophy is very voidist, they still have a huge statue of Buddha. They still have deities even that they offer incense to.
Yeah.
And
we have a god on the wall.
Yeah. And I heard in one of Stephen Knapp's books, I can't remember his initiated name.
Sri Nandanandan.
Right. In his book, he says that in the holiest temple in the Islam world, basically, I can't say where it is or what it is. He said that they actually have an image of God that they worship.
Well, at Makkah, they have the Kaaba, which is a stone, which some people, Hindus say is a Shiva Linga, which they all do parikrama of round the other way, the opposite, anti-clockwise, and they kiss. So what's that? That's worship of a form.
Well, they say it's the rock. Didn't they say it's the rock that
They say
ascended into heaven?
They say it's not actually sacred, but it's like in Catholicism, they have statues who they carry around in processions. They offer candles to, but if you ask them, they say no, it's not really the person. It's not an idol, but it just symbolizes. But they treat as if the form is actually the deity.
Yeah, those old Italian ladies who bathe they have a baby Jesus, they bathe and dress.
Yeah, and so and then Protestantism is rejected that. So we find that they're more the Protestants, they're more impersonal. And Catholics generally take to Krishna consciousness more. In Catholic countries, they're more open to Krishna consciousness than to Protestants, who are very hardcore, impersonalists. And also, interestingly, it seems that the Ritvikism goes on better in countries where Protestantism is strong, because they reject any authority. It's the book and me and God, and that's it.
It's our modern Lutheranism?
Something like that, yeah.
I thought you were going to connect it to impersonalism.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's another form of impersonalism. It's another that only Jesus can be pure, and we cannot be pure. And so we just believe in Him, and He delivers us. So Ritvikism is also something like that. Prabhupada said, you have to be like me. Now, of course, we're not going to be like Him in the full extent, but the fact that we're supposed to be pure devotees, and He wanted that of us. And but their idea is that, well, no one can represent Krishna except Prabhupada, which is not what Prabhupada taught.
You can try it again.
Okay.
You have a comment now.
Well, after that first attempt at asking me a question, it didn't fire up my enthusiasm. But anyway, we can.
I think there's this insight I'd like to offer. I think of all the religions, like I know today you've been discussing Islam and Christianity, but I think the Taoists and their conception of the ultimate, primarily based on the Tao Te Ching, I think it offers a challenge to Krishna consciousness, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean in a way where.
Why don't you let Mark respond to that?
No, my response is.
No, but let him say it.
Thank you very much.
What is the challenge?
Okay, well, the Taoists, they go beyond. Their conception is beyond the supreme being. It's beyond being. So and at the same time, it's not being either. So it's neither this.
Yeah, it's not this, and it's not that, and it's neither this, and it's not this. You can't say it's this, and you can't say it's that, and you cannot say it's neither this nor that. It's mumbo jumbo, actually. It's not this, and it's not that, and it's also not this and not that. It's not thisness and not thatness. It's not anything that we can conceive of. This Umapati Swami gave a quote that I've been reading these Buddhist books, Taoism, whatever. So he was reading statements like this, and then he came to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Umapati Swami said, I thought it was the most intelligent thing I ever heard. What do you mean by being beyond the Supreme Being? What do you mean by that? Can you explain it?
Well, there's one verse that says the Tao forefathers the image of God. In other words,
but it's beyond God, right?
Yeah.
So how can it be the image of God?
It becomes it's the precursor to the form of God.
It's the image of God.
So then the form of God comes after. Then that's supreme.
So it's suggesting that there was. I can't say something here.
That's the point. If you can't explain it, then it doesn't have any meaning.
There was.
The Tao creates God.
If you can't explain it, then please don't speak.
It says
if you can't explain it, please don't speak.
Okay, so
the same book that says one who knows doesn't speak.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't know, so he can speak.
No, but we say you should only speak if you know, otherwise don't speak.
Yeah.
So
it's the same old idea. From the formless comes the form. That's what.
Yeah, right. The one comes.
It's nothing new. Nothing new from China.
It's been around.
Yeah.
It's the same old thing. They all say it.
If you can't explain it, then just don't talk. Better. We are on a lower platform according to your misunderstanding. We're still on the platform of speaking. So better you don't speak. Or if you want to speak, say Hare Krishna. Better. One thing, we don't see any Taoists in bliss, chanting, dancing. We don't see that. So, bliss is better than sitting. Ecstatic dancing is better than sitting in meditation. That you have to choose. What do you want to do? What do you want? What do you want? You have to consider. What do you want? Yeah.
I think this is a good one by Vivekananda Maharaj, that nothing does not exist, because if it existed, it'd be something.
Yeah, if you can conceive of it at all. So if you say everything is meaningless, that in itself, the meaninglessness is a concept which can be conceptualized, which means the very word meaningless has a meaning.
Well, Maharaj, one could counter. All right.
Yeah.
Just like as an example, we stated it's a material example, but it's the best we can do. Like Prabhupada says, the sun and the sunlight.
Yeah.
Obviously, as soon as there's sunlight, and yet we say the sun came first, and then there's the sunlight. So we say the living entities were created by the Supreme Lord. So it's a mundane example, but it gives you some concept.
Yeah.
So there's no way to describe nothingness, because it's beyond words, beyond form, beyond concept. So don't fault us for trying to express this.
But how can you express it if it's beyond concept?
That's my point. So we're doing the best we can with material. So obviously.
But then you can't go there. It's impossible to go there. So why even try?
So out of compassion, to free you from samsara, I'm trying to explain absolutely.
But what's the use of being free from samsara? What's the use?
Well, now you're suffering, and you become free from suffering.
Yeah, but it's all. If the ultimate is beyond all of that, then there's no difference between suffering and non-suffering anyway. Yeah, as long as there's experience, it's not the ultimate.
Well, we could spend time.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. We'd rather suffer and not exist.
Well, that's the old argument. Better to love and lost than never to have loved at all.
Yeah, it's better to. That's what actually happens. That's why. In where Mayavad is propagated, gross sense gratification follows quickly behind. Because the goal of Mayavad and Voidism is to have no existence. And it's very difficult to attain. You have to go through much austerity over many lifetimes. So people think, well, the goal is neither relishable, nor is the process to attain it. So, okay, I'll put that off till later. We'll worship those who are monks, so they can give us some blessings for sense gratification. That's all.
Sounds like Thailand.
Thailand is the most. Yeah, it's according to Bhutatma Prabhu was there before as an astrologer. Venus is the predominating astrological influence there. Sense enjoyment, and very much. I was some time in Thailand, and the whole object of life in Thai culture is sanuk, which means pleasure. That's it. If someone goes through a business meeting and they come back, instead of asking them was it a successful meeting, they'll ask them, Sanuk Maikap, was it fun? Whatever they do, the question is, was it fun? Everything's meant simply for fun. That's all. For pleasure.
Modern culture will also judge even Krishna like that. Even spiritual teachers.
Yeah, this whole Bhakti fest is just, it's for my pleasure.
I like your spiritual teacher very much.
Yeah.
It doesn't increase or decrease his value. Well,
Yeah.
how much
It's called the Bhakti Less Festival.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole idea of spiritual teacher, you look for who you like, find a guru who you like, the one that smiles the most, the one who's nice and pats the babies on the head and is good looking and all this kind of thing. It's a completely mundane approach.
I remember one of the first things I heard Prabhupada say in a darshan. Prabhupada said, should I tell you the truth or should I flatter you? I thought, this is the one for me.
Actually, that book, I thought of doing pure Bhakti, pure Kirtan. Maybe I will do it. If I do it as a lecture, it could be transcribed and edited, something like that. It would be good for these people. They need a good kick in the face, actually. Really, they do. Really. Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing. They don't care for Krishna at all. Krishna, they've adopted Krishna as the supreme object of their own sense gratification.
Just like the Muslim you spoke with at the end, he said, well, I don't believe it.
Yeah. You're not serious. They're not serious. They're not serious.
Defined description. After the argument, Vikasa and Saraswati says that whatever you say is true, but we still accept Mayavad because that's what it is.
No, well, they said that we were attached to Mayavad. We knew inherently in our hearts, we knew that Mayavad is not correct, but we're attached to it because it's our sampradaya. But then they did accept Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he showed them something better. Yeah.
So we're talking about comparing other religions.
We're not talking about comparing other religions. We're talking about understanding the truth. What is actual? Other religions means that they don't actually know what the fact is. What is the actual fact? We're not here to be religious. We're here to understand the truth. What is our actual position, existential position, and to act according to that.
So, in order to believe that the Vedas are the truth, one thing...
No. We're not believing in the truth. We want to understand what is the truth. It's not just a matter of believing. Although it's not just believing. We should understand. That's why we're discussing all these points, so we can understand. It's not just a matter of believing. Blind faith. Not like that.
Like you said that in order to have a discussion, you have to accept the Vedas as axiomatic truth.
Within the Vedic community, yes.
So
then the Vedas have to be accepted as axiomatic. Yeah.
How can we be sure that the Vedas have been preserved 100%? Because if they can preserve 99%...
Oh, actually, there was a system for preserving the Vedas, a verbal system, a very elaborate system, so that not even one syllable or even the intonation of it is lost. A very elaborate system.
How does that system work?
Well, it worked by this part. Part means recitation. So there's a complex system by which the gurus taught disciples. They teach them, and each Veda was to be taught, and there was a, what is that? Chanda part, probably Javeda Prabhu would say, Ghana part. They'd recite one word, and then they'd recite it forwards and then backwards, and two syllables at a time, and 3 syllables at a time, then go backward, and a very elaborate system. So and by hearing, the guru would correct so that the disciples get it right. So exactly the intonation, the matra, the length should be exact, like this. And that was considered authoritative. Books were not considered authoritative. What is heard from the guru, that is considered authoritative. Therefore, Vyasadeva compiled books. Yeah. And what is the proof that this is true? Srila Prabhupada is the truth. Is the evidence of that truth. The fact that a completely God-conscious person who is completely devoid of any trace of sense gratification moved among us and was undefeatable in discussion. He's clearly a God-inspired person. The saints are the evidence of the truth of Krishna consciousness.
Shankaracharya you could say the same about him. He's completely God-conscious, completely pure, but what he spoke was untrue.
That's true.
So how do you know what Srila Prabhupada, maybe Srila Prabhupada just brought us to the next level, not to the high?
Some people may say that.
I don't believe that.
Then, ultimately we have to see. Falena Padachiyate. We have to see, judge a tree by its fruit.
We Because Prabhupada,
There are elaborate systems of checks and balances, which as I was just discussing, we were discussing a little bit that we require a philosophical research institute to get down into the nitty-gritty of all aspects of philosophy, beginning from the beginning, which is epistemology, hermeneutics, and in the Gauriya Vaishnava context. It's very much required. Beginning with that, and then there's the whole elaboration of philosophy. Of course, there is a limit to which you can elaborate it, because at some even at some point, some axioms have to be accepted by anybody for there to be any human intercourse.
I was going to say that Prabhupada, in answer to you, okay, maybe Prabhupada is, like Sankaracharya, would appear to be presenting the absolute truth. Ultimately, he has some purpose behind it. I heard Prabhupada say many times, fine, we're saying Krishna's God, here's our system, here's our laws.
Right.
If you have a better presentation, go ahead. Convince me and I'll follow it. So even if you accept that, if you can find a better definition of truth and a better behavior than the standard Srila Prabhupada said, fine, accept it. But if not, then this is the best before you, take this one.
And what Srila Prabhupada presented, of course, is Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, Adi Devamajam Vibhu. Krishna is the supreme truth. Ahutram Rishaya Sarve Devashi Naradas Tata. Devalo Asito Vyasito Asito Devala Vyasa Swayam Chaiva Bravishime. That all great personalities in history have accepted Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead.
Even Sankaracharya.
Even Shankara, yeah. And so it's not just, when you ask about the ultimate proof, I say, well, Prabhupada, but it's not just his personality. We're not starting something like a believe in Jesus cult here, just believe in Jesus. But that is the ultimate proof of everything that Srila Prabhupada spoke. That doesn't discount philosophy, but Srila Prabhupada's natural enactment of that philosophy at every moment is the proof of that philosophy. Not that we're discounting philosophy by saying that Prabhupada is the proof of it, but rather that it can be demonstrated.
He's the embodiment.
Yeah, he's the very embodiment, personification of that. Hare Krishna. Anything else?